The sun was rising over the city, but the light did not bring peace. For weeks now, the news had been filled with one thing: robberies. Not small ones, but big, violent attacks that spread fear across every street. Mansions, banks, stores, even private homes were being targeted one by one. Security cameras caught shadows of masked men breaking in. Alarms went off across neighborhoods, and yet the robbers always seemed to escape without a trace. People whispered that the police were powerless, and that no one, not even the rich, was safe anymore. Inside one of the largest mansions of the city lived Adrian Cole, a billionaire whose name appeared often in business magazines. His life was normally filled with luxury, but lately even he could not escape the fear creeping into the air. His mansion was guarded day and night, gates locked, and cameras always on. But Adrian knew money could not stop the growing storm. His staff whispered, nervously, jumping at every sound. Guards checked doors again and again. Even his closest advisors urged him to leave the city. Yet in the middle of this unease, there was one person who stood out: Alina, his maid. While the others panicked, Alina moved calmly from room to room, polishing the tables, watering the plants, and preparing Adrian's breakfast as though nothing unusual was happening outside. Her footsteps were quiet, steady, and her face showed no fear. She even smiled sometimes, the kind of smile that made it seem like the world outside did not exist. Adrian first noticed it during a morning meal. He sat at the long dining table, scrolling through the latest reports on his tablet, every headline screaming the same thing: another robbery, another home destroyed. His hands were tense, his jaw tight. But then his eyes drifted to Alina. She was laying out his breakfast with the same care she always had. The silverware gleamed, the napkin was folded perfectly, and the cup of coffee was placed in front of him at just the right temperature. "You're very calm," Adrian said suddenly, his voice sharper than he intended. Alina looked at him, surprised but not shaken. "Why should I not be, sir?" she asked softly. "Do you not hear the news?" Adrian's voice rose. "Every day there is a new robbery. People are scared. My staff can hardly sleep. And yet you walk around as if none of it matters." Her eyes met his steadily. "Fear never solved a problem," she replied. "Panic only blinds people. If the danger comes, it will come. But until then, I do my work." Her words unsettled Adrian. He expected her to explain herself, maybe admit that she was nervous too. But her face remained calm, her hands steady as she cleared the tray. He could not understand it. How could a maid, a woman with no guards or wealth, remain calm while billionaires like him were losing sleep? Throughout the day, Adrian found himself watching her more closely. When the security alarms rang for a false alert, most of the staff jumped and gasped, but Alina simply looked toward the sound, nodded once, and continued wiping the counter. When the guards muttered about the robbers possibly targeting the mansion, Alina carried fresh linens upstairs as if she had not heard a word. She carried herself with the same peace, no matter what storm raged around her. By evening, Adrian could no longer ignore it. Something about her calmness was too unusual. He wondered if she was hiding something, or if she simply did not care. About the danger, he thought of asking her again, but pride held him back. After all, he was a man who controlled businesses, fortunes, and power. Yet here he was, unsettled by the silence of his maid. Later that night, Adrian stood by the window of his study, looking out over the city. From his hilltop mansion, he could see the lights stretching far into the distance. Somewhere out there, men were breaking into homes, taking what they wanted, spreading terror. The thought made his chest tighten. But then, downstairs, he heard the faint sound of footsteps. He knew at once whose they were: Lena's. Calm, steady, never hurried. For the first time in many days, Adrian felt a strange sense of curiosity instead of fear. He realized he wanted to know her secret. What gave her that composure? What kept her heart steady when even billionaires were trembling? He turned away from the window and sat down in his chair, the question still echoing in his mind. He had no answer yet, but he knew one thing for certain. Alina was not an ordinary maid. And whatever truth lay behind her calmness, it was only a matter of time before the world would see it too. The following morning began like any other. Though the city outside was far from normal, the news channels were once again filled with fear. Reports of robberies had spread into wealthier districts, and people whispered that even the most secure estates could be next. Guards in Adrian's mansion grew restless, pacing the halls more than usual. The staff spoke in hushed tones, some asking if they should send their families away from the city before things got worse. Adrian Cole noticed everything. He noticed the nervous glances, the hurried footsteps, the extra locks being checked again and again. But what he noticed most was Alina. She was not nervous, not hurried, not fearful. While others moved as if chased by shadows, she moved like still water calm. Steady, unshaken. At first, Adrian thought maybe she was simply unaware. Perhaps Alina had not seen the news. But he quickly dismissed that thought. Everyone had seen the news. The stories of armed gangs storming houses and shops were impossible to ignore. The guards discussed them loudly in the halls. Staff whispered while working. Even Adrian's own advisors spoke with panic when they visited the mansion. Alina must have heard every word. Yet her face carried no fear. That day, Adrian watched her more closely than before. He did not want to admit it, but his mind kept circling back to her. At breakfast, she served the food with her usual precision, when a glass slipped from another servant's hand and shattered. The young man nearly jumped out of his skin in panic, but Alina calmly picked up the pieces with steady hands, reassuring the boy that accidents happen. Later, when a guard ran inside to report seeing suspicious shadows near the back gate, most of the staff gasped and clutched at each other. But Alina simply looked out the window for a moment, then returned to folding laundry, as though nothing had changed. It puzzled Adrian deeply. He had built companies, signed billion-dollar deals, negotiated with powerful men. But he had never been able to master calmness the way Alina carried it so effortlessly. He caught himself staring at her hands as they worked, always precise, never rushed, never trembling. Her eyes carried the same quiet focus, a steadiness that made the chaos around her feel almost small. Finally, near noon, he called her into his study. "Alina," Adrian said, leaning back in his chair. "Tell me something. Do you understand what's happening outside these walls?" She paused, her hands folded neatly in front of her apron. "Yes, sir," she answered softly. "Then, you know that people are afraid," he pressed. "The staff are frightened. Even the guards cannot hide their nerves. And yet you..." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You are different. You act as though nothing is happening. Why?" Alina did not flinch. Her expression was the same as always, calm, respectful, but steady. "Because fear solves nothing, sir. Fear blinds. It makes people act without thought. When danger is near, the only thing that matters is clarity." Her words made Adrian silent. They were spoken simply, without drama, but they carried weight. Clarity, it was not the word of a maid who had never seen hardship. It was the word of someone who had faced storms before. Adrian studied her. "And where did you learn that lesson?" For the first time, Alina's eyes shifted. A flicker so brief that most would have missed it crossed her face. A memory. Perhaps a shadow of something she had lived through. But in the next moment, her composure returned. "From life, sir," she said. Her voice even. Adrian wanted to push further, but he stopped himself. Something told him that Alina would not answer easily, and pressing her would only drive her silence deeper. Still, the flicker he had seen in her eyes stayed in his mind. Later that evening, as darkness fell over the city, the mansion grew tense again. Rumor spread that one of the gangs had been spotted only a few streets away. Guards doubled there. Patrols. Staff whispered of quitting before it was too late. Adrian sat in his private lounge, watching the news reports roll in. Cars set on fire. Families robbed at gunpoint. Panic spreading like wildfire. His chest tightened with unease. He had more money than he could ever spend, more security than most people could imagine. But in that moment, Adrian Cole felt powerless. He could not control the wave that was sweeping through the city. Then he heard footsteps, slow, steady, familiar. Alina entered quietly with a tray, carrying tea. She placed the cup in front of him, adjusted the saucer, and stood back. No trembling. Hands, no nervous glances at the doors. Just the same calmness she always carried. Adrian looked up at her, almost in disbelief. "Alina, are you truly not afraid?" Her reply was quiet but firm. "Fear wastes time, sir. And in times like these, time is the one thing we cannot waste." Adrian sat back, her words echoing in his head. Fear wastes time. He thought about his staff ruining, whispering, panicking. He thought about himself, sleepless nights, nervous thoughts, endless worry. And then he looked at Alina, a maid, with no fortune, no guards, no influence. Yet she stood stronger than any of them. That night, as Adrian tried to sleep, he realized something strange. For the first time in weeks, his mind did not focus only on the robbers or the chaos. Instead, it focused on Alina. Who was she really? What past had given her such control, such steadiness? And why did it feel like she knew something the rest of them did not? He did not have the answers. But he knew one thing for certain. Alina's calmness was no accident. It was a clue. A clue to a story far larger than he had imagined. And soon, the world would see what that calmness truly meant. The days passed. And with each sunrise, the city seemed to sink deeper into fear. News of robberies no longer came once in a while. It came every hour. Banks were looted in broad daylight. Armored trucks were ambushed on highways, and private homes were raided even in guarded neighborhoods. The criminals grew bolder, and it felt as though no place was safe. Inside Adrian Cole's mansion, the atmosphere grew heavier. His guards worked in shifts around the clock, but even they could not hide their unease. The staff whispered about quitting, some claiming they had family to protect, others saying the mansion would surely be targeted soon. Every sound at night made hearts race. A branch tapping against the window, a dog barking in the distance, or a car speeding down the road, all made people flinch. Adrian noticed this change in everyone except Alina. She continued her daily tasks with the same calmness as before. Dusting the grand halls, arranging flowers in the vases, preparing meals. Folding sheets, always with steady hands, always with quiet focus. Even when the guards argued among themselves about how soon the gangs might reach them, Alina walked past them with a soft smile, her steps unshaken. At first, Adrian thought her calmness was admirable. But now, as the robbery spread closer and closer, it began to feel unusual, almost suspicious. How could she be so untouched by fear when the entire city trembled? He began to ask himself questions he never thought he would ask about a maid. Did she know something the others didn't? Was she hiding a connection? Or was she simply extraordinary? One evening, Adrian gathered his staff in the main hall. His advisors urged him to prepare an emergency plan where to hide if the mansion was attacked, how to secure valuables, how to escape if necessary. The staff murmured anxiously, their voices rising like a tide of panic. Some even begged him to hire more guards or move to a safer location. Adrian listened, but his eyes drifted toward Alina, who stood quietly at the side. Her hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She simply watched, her face calm, almost serene. Finally, Adrian pointed toward her. "Alina," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You've been silent. What do you think?" The room fell quiet. Everyone turned to look at her. Alina met Adrian's gaze. "I think," she said softly, "that fear is doing more harm to this house than the robbers themselves." Murmurs rippled through the staff. Some frowned, others shook their heads. Adrian leaned forward. "And what would you suggest?" Elena's reply was steady. "Stay alert, but do not panic. If the danger comes, panic will only make it worse." Her words angered some of the staff. "That's easy for her to say," one whispered. "She doesn't own anything here." Another muttered, "She doesn't understand. She's just a maid." But Adrian stayed quiet, his eyes fixed on her. Something in her tone was different. She did not sound naive or ignorant. She sounded certain. That night, Adrian found himself pacing his study. He couldn't stop thinking about Alina. He had known many people in his life's business rivals. Powerful leaders, skilled negotiators, but none had carried such steady certainty in times of crisis. It unsettled him, and it intrigued him. The tension grew worse the following week. Reports came that robberies had reached a neighborhood not far from Adrian's estate. The criminals were ruthless, breaking into mansions with armed force, leaving destruction behind. Families were fleeing the city, entire districts falling into silence as people abandoned their homes. The staff inside Adrian's mansion reached a breaking point. 3 servants resigned and left in the middle of the night, claiming they could no longer live in fear. One guard asked for leave, saying he had to protect his children. Those who remained grew restless, whispering that the mansion was doomed. But still Alina stayed calm. Adrian noticed her even more now. Every morning, when he read the terrifying headlines, she brought his coffee without a trace of fear in her movements. When the guards reported new threats, she listened quietly, but carried on with her duties. Once Adrian overheard 2 young maids whispering that perhaps Alina was mad. Because no one sane could remain so calm in such times. But Adrian didn't believe she was mad. No, he believed she was something else entirely. Late one evening, after another day of bad news, Adrian called her again to his study. The fire in the fireplace cast a warm glow, but the tension in the air was cold. "Alina," Adrian said slowly, "you are not like the others. Everyone is falling apart, but you remain steady. I must know why. What is your secret?" For a moment, she was silent. Then she looked at him with calm eyes. "Because, sir," she said quietly, "I have seen worse than this." Adrian froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "You've seen worse," he repeated, his voice low. Alina gave a small nod. "Yes, sir. Much worse." But before he could ask further, she lowered her eyes and said, "With respect, it is late. You should rest." Then she turned and left the room, her footsteps fading into the hallway. Adrian sat there, stunned. For days he had wondered about her calmness, and now, for the first time, he had a clue. She had seen worse. But what could be worse than the chaos outside? What had she lived through that gave her such strength now? The questions burned in his mind, stronger than before. He realized Alina was no ordinary maid. She carried a past one that might explain everything. And somehow, Adrian felt that soon. Whether he wanted to or not, he would discover the truth. Adrian Cole barely slept that night. Alina's words kept echoing in his mind. "I have seen worse than this." They were not words of comfort, nor a careless remark. They were sharp, deliberate, and spoken with certainty. And now they haunted him. What could be worse than the robberies terrorizing the city? What experiences had shaped her into someone who could stand calm while everyone else was drowning in fear? By morning, Adrian's curiosity had turned into obsession. He watched her closely, not in the way of a master watching a servant, but like a man trying to read a mystery written in plain sight. Elena's every movement seemed the same as before, steady, composed, disciplined. But now, Adrian felt there was more hidden beneath that calm surface. He called his head of security, Marcus, to his study. Marcus was a tall, broad man with years of experience in protection. "Find out about her," Adrian ordered. "Sir." Marcus raised a brow. "Elena, my maid," Adrian explained, leaning forward. "Where did she come from? Who was she before?" "She came here. I want every detail." Marcus frowned. "Is there a problem with her?" Adrian hesitated. "No, that's the problem. There's something different about her." "I want to know what." Marcus nodded, though clearly puzzled, and left to begin the search. The following days stretched on with more tension. Robberies had moved even closer. A mansion not 3 miles away from Adrian's estate had been attacked. The family inside was forced to flee, leaving everything behind. Fear inside Adrian's home grew so thick it was almost physical. Servants whispered about leaving. Guards doubled their efforts, but their nerves showed in every movement. And yet, Elena remained unchanged. Adrian caught glimpses of her in the garden, trimming flowers with delicate care. He saw her polishing the silver in the dining room, her reflection steady and focused. He noticed her walking through the halls late at night, checking that windows were locked not with fear, but with quiet determination. Finally, Marcus returned with information. He entered Adrian's study with a folder in his hand, his face unreadable. "Well?" Adrian asked quickly. Marcus placed the folder on the desk. "She's not ordinary, sir. Her records are too thin, almost like someone erased parts of her past. But what I found, it's unusual." Adrian opened the folder. Inside were a few papers, photocopies, and an old photograph. "Elena was born in a small town, far from here," Marcus began. "Her childhood is unclear, but there are traces that she lived through conflict, armed raids, village attacks, that sort of thing. She was very young when it happened. Many people in her region didn't survive." Adrian stared at the photograph. It was grainy, but he could see a young girl standing with others, her face partly shadowed. Even then, her eyes seemed older than her age, holding something steady, something unshaken. "She lost her family, didn't she?" Adrian asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "Most likely. After that, there are records of her working in different places, farms, shops, even as a caregiver. Always quiet, always reliable, no complaints, no trouble. She came here 5 years ago, recommended by another house where she served. Beyond that, sir, there's nothing unusual, except her past. She has lived through things most of us can't even imagine." Adrian leaned back in his chair, the weight of the revelation pressing on him. It all made sense now. Her calmness wasn't ignorance, nor madness. It was strength born of survival. While his staff panicked over robberies, Elena had once lived through war. While he trembled at the thought of losing his wealth, she had once lost everything. For a long moment, Adrian was silent. Then he closed the folder. "Thank you, Marcus," he said quietly. "That will be all." Marcus nodded and left, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts. That evening, Adrian found Elena in the library, dusting the shelves. The glow of the lamps lit her calm face as she worked, humming softly to herself. For a while, he simply watched her, the weight of her hidden past heavy in his chest. Finally, he spoke. "Elena." She turned to him, her expression the same as always, polite, composed. "Yes, sir." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, but then returned to their calm focus. Know what, sir? I know you've lived through worse, Adrian said firmly. I know about your past. Alina placed the book she was holding back on the shelf, her movements slow and precise. And what difference does that make, sir? She asked softly. It explains you, Adrian said. It explains why you don't fear what others do, why you remain steady when the rest of us fall apart. For a long moment, Alina was silent. Then she looked at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Survival teaches you things no book can, she said finally. When you lose everything once, you stop fearing losing again. You learn that panic does not save lives, only clarity does. Her words struck him like truth carved in stone. Alina, he said slowly, you are not just a maid. She gave the faintest smile. And you, sir, are not just a billionaire. The words surprised him. What do you mean? You have power, influence, wealth, she said gently. But you live in fear, like everyone else. You guard your treasures, but not your peace. Perhaps that is why you noticed me. Not because I am special, but because I am free from the fear that still holds you. Adrian was stunned into silence. Her words cut deeper than he expected. He had thought of himself as powerful, yet here was a maid telling him his true weakness. And she was right. Before he could respond, a loud alarm rang through the mansion. The guards shouted from the gates. Adrian's heart leaped. What is it? He demanded. A guard burst into the library. Sir, movement at the east gate, armed men. The staff screamed from the other rooms. Panic exploded like wildfire. People ran in every direction, guards rushing to take positions. Servants crying out in fear. And through it all, Alina stood perfectly still. Her eyes sharp, her body steady. She turned to Adrian and spoke in a calm, steady voice that cut through the chaos. It begins now, sir. The alarm echoed through the mansion like a scream. Lights flashed along the hallways. Guards shouted orders, and the staff scattered in panic. Adrian Cole's heart pounded as he hurried toward the main hall. The east gate, the one Marcus had reinforced only a week ago, was under attack. Through the security cameras, Adrian saw them. A group of masked men, armed and ruthless, cutting through the outer defenses with terrifying speed. They moved like professionals, shouting commands, covering each other, smashing through barriers. They're too many. One guard yelled, "Hold the gates." Marcus barked, his voice strong, but even he looked worried. Adrian felt a wave of fear grip him. For weeks he had feared this moment, and now it was here. The robbers had come for him. His mansion, his fortune, his life, they were all at risk. But amid the chaos, his eyes found Alina. She was not running. She was not screaming like the others. She stood near the grand staircase, watching the screen with calm eyes. Her hands were steady at her sides, her breathing controlled. In that moment, Adrian saw her not as a maid, but as something else, someone who belonged to another world entirely. "Alina," he shouted over the noise. "Aren't you afraid? They're breaking in." She looked at him, her gaze sharp. "Fear will not stop them, sir. Action will." Before Adrian could ask what she meant, the sound of glass shattering filled the hall. The robbers had broken through a side window. Shouts and gunfire erupted. The staff screamed and ducked behind furniture. Guards rushed forward, weapons raised. Adrian froze, his body refusing to move. For the first time, he felt truly powerless in his own home. And then Alina moved, not with panic, but with purpose. She slipped through the chaos with quiet speed, her steps silent, her body low. Adrian's eyes followed her, confused and stunned. This was no ordinary movement. She wasn't running blindly like the staff, she was moving with precision. Like someone trained, someone who had done this before. Alina. He shouted again, but she didn't look back. 2 robbers stormed into the main hall, shouting orders and waving their weapons. The guards fired back, the sound deafening. Alina crouched behind a pillar, her face calm, her eyes focused. She didn't tremble. She didn't hesitate then to Adrian's shock. She picked up a metal rod that had fallen from a broken lampstand. In one swift motion, she stepped out from behind the pillar and swung it at the first robber's arm. The man cried out, his weapon clattering to the floor. Before he could recover, Alina struck his knee, sending him collapsing to the ground. The second robber turned, raising his weapon toward Herb. Alina moved faster. She grabbed the fallen man's gun, aimed it low, and fired a single shot at the robber's leg. He dropped instantly, screaming in pain. The hall fell silent for a moment. Everyone stared, stunned. Adrian could barely breathe. His maid, his quiet, calm maid, had just taken down 2 armed men in seconds. Alina, he whispered, disbelief in his voice. But she didn't pause. She turned to Marcus, who was staring in shock. "Get your men to the West Wing," she ordered sharply. "I'll try to circle around." Marcus blinked, then nodded, as though under a spell. "You heard her." He barked to his guards, and they rushed off. Adrian's mind spun. How could Alina know their movements? How could she fight like that? Who was she? The robbers outside were still pressing forward, breaking through more defenses. The mansion shook with the sounds of gunfire, glass breaking, doors slamming. Alina moved quickly, guiding staff into safer rooms, giving orders with authority that no one dared question. Her calmness was no longer quiet, was commanding, powerful. "Stay." Together, she told the staff firmly, "Do not separate. Do not panic. Breathe." Her voice carried such strength that even the most terrified servants nodded and obeyed. Adrian followed her, almost without thinking. He was the billionaire, the master of the house, but in this moment, he felt like a follower. She was the leader now. "Alina," he demanded, his voice shaking. "How do you know what to do? Who are you?" She paused only for a second, her eyes meeting his. "I told you, sir, I have seen worse." Then she moved again, faster than before. The battle raged for nearly an hour. The robbers forced their way deeper into the mansion, but everywhere they turned, Alina was one step ahead. She guided guards into ambush positions, predicted the enemy's moves, and fought with skills that no maid should have. Adrian watched in awe and fear as she disarmed one robber with a quick twist of the wrist, then used his own momentum to send him crashing into a wall. She handled weapons like someone who had trained for years, her movements sharp and precise. Even Marcus, a seasoned guard, looked at her with disbelief. "She fights like military," he muttered under his breath. Adrian's heart raced. Military? Was that the truth? Was Alina not a maid at all, but someone who had once lived as a soldier, a fighter, maybe even more? When the last of the robbers were finally forced out of the mansion, silence fell. Broken glass and splintered wood lay across the floors. The staff huddled together, trembling but alive. The guards caught their breath, their eyes still wide from what they had witnessed, and there, standing tall in the middle of the wreckage, was Alina, calm, composed, her hair slightly disheveled, her apron torn, but her eyes steady as ever. Adrian stepped forward slowly, his voice unsteady. You saved us." Alina looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I did what was necessary." "No," Adrian said firmly, shaking his head. "This is not who you said you were. You are no ordinary maid. Tell me the truth. Who are you, Alina?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, she spoke. her voice low but clear. "The world thinks I am a maid," she said. "But once, long ago, I was something very different." The mansion was quiet after the storm of violence. Broken glass crunched underfoot, smoke from gunfire hung faintly in the air, and the staff huddled in corners, still trembling from the shock of what had happened. Guards walked the halls nervously, checking every door and window, but their eyes kept drifting back to Alina. They had seen her fight. They had seen her move like no maid should. And now, they looked at her not with dismissal, but with awe and a little fear. Adrian Cole stood in the center of the ruined hall, his heart pounding as his eyes fixed on her. He could not shake the image of Alina taking down armed men with calm precision. He could not unsee the way she gave orders that even Marcus, his most trusted head of security, followed without hesitation. "Alina," he said at last, his voice rough, "you said you were something different, and now I want thee. Truth, who are you?" Alina stood still for a moment, her apron torn, her hair slightly messy, but her eyes calm as always. Slowly, she removed the apron and set it aside, as though shedding the role she had played for years. "I am not only what you thought, sir," she said quietly. "I was never just a maid." Adrian stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Then what? Are you military? An agent? An assassin?" Her eyes softened with a sadness that surprised him. "Once, I was all of those things, and none of them." The staff murmured in confusion. Marcus frowned, watching her carefully. Alina took a deep breath. "Years ago, in a country far from here, I lived through war. My village was destroyed in a raid. Armed men, not unlike those who attacked us tonight, came and burned everything I knew. I lost my family, my home, everything. I was just a girl, but I learned that survival depends on clarity, not fear." Her voice was steady, but her words carried weight, as though each one was carved from her own scars. "I was taken in by those who fought back. They trained me. They made me into a fighter. I learned how to defend myself, how to lead, how to stay calm when others broke. For years, I lived in conflict, where every day could be the last. I saw worse than what happened here tonight, much worse. And that is why I do not fear these robbers. Compared to what I have seen, they are nothing." The room was silent. The staff listened with wide eyes. The guards stood still. Even Adrian felt the world tilt under her words. He swallowed hard. "So you were a soldier?" "Yes," she said, softly, "but more than that. I became someone people depended on. I led others, guided them through chaos. But war has a way of consuming everything. After many years, I walked away. I wanted peace. I wanted a life where I could be invisible, where I could simply serve quietly and not hold the weight of others' lives in my hands." Her eyes met. Adrian's steady but heavy with truth. "That is why I came here. To live simply. To be just a maid." Adrian struggled to breathe. The woman who had quietly polished his floors, folded his clothes, and served his meals was the same woman who had once commanded survival in a war zone. He felt both admiration and disbelief swirling inside him. "You hid all of this," he said quietly. "All these years, you lived in my house and never said a word." Alina nodded. "Because it did not matter. You hired me as a maid, and I was content to be one. I did not want to remember what I had been." Marcus finally spoke, his voice low with awe. "That explains everything. The way you moved tonight. The way you knew what they would do. You've done this before." Alina turned to him. "Yes, many times." Adrian shook his head slowly. "But why help us now? You could have stayed hidden, done nothing, and let the guards handle it." For the first time, a small, faint smile touched Elena's lips. "Because, sir, I may have walked away from my past, but I cannot walk away from people in need. Fear was destroying this house long before the robbers entered. I could not stand by and watch it consume everyone. Someone had to be calm. Someone had to act. Her words struck Adrian deeper than any blow. She was right. Fear had paralyzed him, even with all his money and guards. Yet this woman who had nothing stood stronger than all of them. He looked around at his staff, still trembling, then back at Alina, who stood tall and unshaken. You saved us all, he said finally. Alina lowered her gaze. No, I only did what I have always done. Survive and help others survive. Adrian felt a strange mix of gratitude and shame. Gratitude because she had protected his home, his people. Shame because he, the billionaire who owned everything, had been powerless while his maid no. His protector had done what he could not. The silence stretched until one of the younger maids whispered, "She's not like us." Alina turned to her, her calm eyes softening. "No, I am exactly like you. I have simply walked a harder path. But in the end, we are all the same. We all fear, we all hope, we all survive." Her words, spoken simply, seemed to calm the staff. More than any guard's order had. They sat a little straighter, breathed a little easier. Adrian stepped closer. "Alina, you cannot go back to being just a maid now, not after this. The world must know who you are." But Alina shook her head. Firmly, "No, sir. The world does not need another fighter. It has too many already. I will continue, as I always have, quietly, calmly. My place is here." Her words stunned him again. How could someone so powerful choose to remain invisible? How could she, who had saved them all, still insist on serving silently? Adrian realized then that Alina's strength was not only in her skills, but in her humility. She did not seek recognition. She did not crave power. She had chosen peace, even after living through war. But deep down, Adrian also knew one thing. The world outside was not done with chaos. The robbers would return. The city's storm was not over. And when that time came, Alina would once again be forced to stand where no one else could. For now, though, she simply picked up her torn apron, dusted it off, and tied it back around her waist. Then she turned to Adrian with her calm smile. "Would you like me to prepare tea, sir?" The question was so ordinary, so simple, that for a moment Adrian could not reply. Then he gave a quiet laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Yes, Alina," he said softly. "Yes, I would." And with that, she walked away, her footsteps calm and steady, as though nothing extraordinary had happened at all. The night of the attack ended. But the mansion never returned to what it had been before. Broken windows were repaired, the walls cleaned, the blood washed away, but the memory of what had happened refused to leave. The staff whispered in corners. Guards exchanged glances, and Adrian walked his halls with a heavier step. Yet, amid all this, one thing remained unchanged. Alina. She worked as she always had. Steady, calm, her hands folding linens and pouring tea as if nothing extraordinary had ever taken place. She avoided the curious stares of the staff and answered questions with short, gentle words that gave away little. But outside the mansion, whispers had already begun to spread. The robbers who had survived fled into the city, their stories wild with fear. They spoke of a woman in an apron moving faster than bullets, of eyes that could see through lies, of hands that disarmed weapons as if they were toys. At first, no one believed them. How could a maid take down a band of armed men? But when the police quietly investigated the scene, when they saw the evidence of one woman's precision, the rumors began to take shape. The newspapers caught the scent next. Unknown woman foils armed raid on billionaire's mansion. Read one headline. "Who is the maid who fought like a soldier?" asked another. Photographers camped outside Adrian's gates. Journalists begged for statements, and online forums lit up with speculation. Some called her a hero. Others said she must have been an undercover agent secretly protecting the billionaire. A few dismissed it all as exaggeration. But the stories kept growing, and soon, Elena's name was whispered far beyond the city. Inside the mansion, Adrian struggled to contain it. "Elena," he said one morning, setting the newspaper down with frustration. "They will not leave. You alone. The world wants to know who you are." Elena placed a tray of tea before him, her expression unchanged. "The world wants stories, sir. They will tire of me soon." But Adrian shook his head. "No, Elena. This is different. They are not just curious, they are inspired. Look." He pushed the paper toward her, pointing to a section where ordinary people had written letters. One letter read, "If a maid can face danger without fear, maybe I can face my own troubles with courage too." Another, "She shows us that strength is not in wealth, but in spirit." Elena's eyes softened as she read, but she only said, "Words fade. Reality remains." Yet reality was changing. The police requested to speak with her. Officials asked Adrian if she would consider training their officers. A charity organization begged her to tell her story to children in war-torn neighborhoods. Even the media offered money for interviews. But Elena refused them all. "I am not here for fame," she said quietly. "I am here to work, a team to live in." Peace. The staff could not understand her. Some grew resentful, wondering why she denied herself the recognition she deserved. Others admired her even more, whispering that true greatness was found in humility. A daydream, more than anyone, was torn. One evening, he confronted her again. "Elena, do you not see what you've done? You have changed lives. You have shown people that courage can exist anywhere even in a maid's uniform. You could do so much more if you stepped into the light." Elena looked at him steadily, her calm gaze holding him in place. "And what would that bring, sir? Fame, attention, demands that I return to the life I left behind. I have seen what happens when the world calls someone a hero. They do not rest. They do not live. They only fight until there is nothing left of them." Adrian fell silent. Her words rang with truth. Still, the world did not stop talking. Videos of the aftermath leaked, showing the broken hall where she had stood. Neighbors spoke of the billionaire's maid who saved them all. Social media carried her image far and wide, and soon, she became a symbol. Some called her the calm maid. Others called her the hidden warrior. To many, she was proof that true strength came from unexpected places. But Elena herself refused to change. Late at night, when the mansion was quiet, Adrian sometimes found her sitting alone in the garden, gazing at the stars. Once, he asked her what she thought about when she looked up at the sky. "I think of silence," she said softly. "Of the nights in my village before the war, when all we had was the sound of crickets and the hope of tomorrow. I remember what peace felt like. That is what I seek now. Not the noise of fame." Her words humbled him. For all his billions, Adrian realized he had never known peace the way she did. Yet, fate, as it always does, had other plans. One evening, a group of reporters managed to break through the gates, rushing toward the mansion with cameras flashing. Guards shouted, the staff panicked, but Elena only stood at the doorway, calm as ever.